Sometimes the universe doesn't send you a miracle, Ethan Walker used to say. Sometimes it crash lands bleeding into the snow. The plasma storm rolled across Keeler, 9 like a living thing, turning the black sky crimson every few seconds as lightning crawled through the frozen clouds. Ethan stood alone on the roof of Outpost 7, his heavy thermal coat snapping violently in the wind while old warning antennas groaned above him. The temperature had dropped to nearly 60 below, cold enough to freeze exposed skin solid in under a minute, but the alarms inside the station had forced him outside anyway. Something was falling through the atmosphere. He narrowed his eyes against the burning snow and saw it at once. A streak of fire cut through the red storm overhead, screaming across the sky like a dying star. "That's no meteor," Ethan muttered under his breath. His wrist scanner crackled weakly as interference flooded every channel. The object descended fast, trailing sparks and smoke before vanishing beyond the ice ridges nearly 3 miles east of the station. Then came the impact. The ground beneath Ethan's boots trembled hard enough to rattle the rusted railings around him. Snow slid from the roof in thick sheets. Somewhere out there in the storm, something had just crashed. Ethan exhaled slowly, already regretting the decision forming in his head. Most people on Keeler, 9 survived by ignoring trouble. Out here, curiosity usually got you killed. He climbed down the frozen ladder anyway. 20 minutes later, his crawler truck pushed through waist-high snowdrifts while plasma lightning flashed overhead in violent bursts of red and white. The old engine whined in protest with every mile. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter as the wreck finally emerged through the storm ahead of him. It wasn't a cargo ship. It was military. Sleek black metal jutted from the ice at an angle, half buried beneath smoking snow. Strange silver symbols glowed faintly across the shattered hull. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Royal markings. Alien royalty. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered. Steam hissed from broken pipes as he stepped closer, boots crunching across frozen debris. The air smelled like ozone and burning metal. One side of the ship had split open during impact, exposing flickering lights inside. Ethan raised his flashlight and moved carefully through the wreckage. Then he heard it. Breathing. Weak. Unsteady. Human instinct shoved aside common sense before he could stop it. He followed the sound deeper into the ruined cabin until the beam of his flashlight settled on a figure lying against the twisted wall. For a second, Ethan forgot the cold entirely. She looked almost unreal beneath the flashing emergency lights. Blue skin shimmered softly beneath streaks of frost. Long silver hair spilled across the floor like liquid moonlight. Her dark suit was torn at the shoulder, revealing glowing patterns beneath her skin that pulsed faintly with each shallow breath. And in her arms, clutched tightly against her chest, was a crystal sphere radiating soft violet light. Her eyes opened suddenly. Bright violet. Sharp despite the pain. Ethan froze as she tried to lift a small metallic weapon toward him with trembling fingers. "Easy," he said quietly, lowering his flashlight. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien girl stared at him for several long seconds while the storm screamed outside the broken ship. Then her voice finally came, barely louder than the wind. "If they find me." Her breathing shook painfully as she tightened her grip on the glowing sphere. "Billions will die." A violent burst of thunder shook the wreckage overhead. Somewhere high above the clouds, engines roared through the storm. Ethan slowly looked up toward the blood-red sky. Something else was coming. The engines above the storm grew louder by the second. Ethan felt the vibration through the frozen floor of the wreck before he even saw the lights piercing the clouds overhead. Whoever was searching for this girl was close. Very close. The alien woman tried to raise the weapon again, but her hand shook too badly to aim it. Frost clung to her silver eyelashes while blood the color of glowing sapphire seeped slowly through the damaged fabric near her side. Ethan recognized the look in her eyes immediately. Exhaustion. Fear. The kind people carried when they had been running for too long. "You need medical attention," he said carefully. "Now." "You need to leave," she whispered back. Her voice sounded strained, yet there was still authority buried beneath it. Humans are not permitted to interfere. Ethan glanced toward the torn opening in the hull, where red lightning flashed across the snow outside. "Yeah," he muttered. "Well, this planet is not exactly big on permits." Another distant rumble rolled through the sky. This time it was not thunder. It sounded mechanical, controlled. The alien girl heard it too. Her eyes widened for the first time since he found her. They tracked the beacon, she breathed. How long until they arrive? Ethan checked the motion scanner attached to his wrist. Several fast-moving signals blinked across the cracked display. Less than 4 miles away and closing fast. Not long. The girl closed her eyes briefly, as if calculating something painful. Then she pressed the glowing sphere into Ethan's hands. The crystal was warm despite the freezing air, faint violet patterns moving beneath its surface like living light. Take it, she said weakly. Ethan frowned. What is this? Hope, she whispered. Or the end of your world. I am still deciding. Even injured, she somehow managed to sound serious. Ethan stared at her for a moment before sliding the sphere carefully into his coat pocket. You can threaten me later, he said. Right now we are leaving. He crouched beside her and slipped one arm carefully around her shoulders. The moment he touched her skin, the strange glowing lines beneath it flickered brighter. The alien girl stiffened immediately. Do not touch me. Kind of difficult to carry you otherwise. Human biology carries dangerous bacteria. Ethan gave a tired half-smile despite the storm raging around them. Lady, I have worked on mining stations for 12 years. I am pretty sure the bacteria are more afraid of me. To his surprise, the corner of her mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Another pulse of light swept across the wreckage outside. Searchlights. Ethan did not wait any longer. He lifted her carefully into his arms and carried her toward the crawler while snow blasted through the broken ship behind them. The cold hit like a hammer the second they stepped outside. Wind screamed across the ice fields hard enough to nearly throw them sideways. The girl pressed weakly against his chest, her body trembling from the temperature. Ethan lowered his head against the storm and pushed forward one heavy step at a time. Halfway to the truck, bright lights suddenly ignited high above the clouds. Massive shadows moved through the red storm overhead. Ships, sleek black vessels drifted silently between flashes of plasma lightning, their engines glowing like blue fire through the snow. Ethan stopped walking for one terrible second. There had to be at least a dozen of them. Hunting parties. The alien girl looked up at the sky with quiet horror in her glowing violet eyes. They found me, she whispered. Ethan tightened his grip on her and kept moving. Then they're going to have to get through me first. She stared at him in disbelief, as though the sentence itself made no logical sense. And somewhere deep inside the freezing storm, for reasons Ethan could not possibly understand yet, the daughter of the most feared queen in the galaxy suddenly looked at him differently. The crawler's engine groaned as Ethan forced it across the frozen ridge toward Outpost 7. Snow slammed against the windshield so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel striking metal, and every few seconds the sky flashed red from the storm overhead. The alien girl lay motionless across the passenger seat wrapped in 2 thermal blankets, while pale blue light pulsed weakly beneath her skin. Ethan kept glancing toward her between steering corrections. She looked worse now. Her breathing had become shallow, uneven. Stay awake, he said firmly. You pass out on me, and I am charging you extra for medical care. Her violet eyes opened slightly. You joke during danger. It is either that or panic. Humans are strange. That has been scientifically confirmed. For the first time since he found her, he heard something soft escape her lips. A faint laugh. It lasted barely a second before pain crossed her face again. Ethan's expression tightened. He pushed the crawler. Faster. The old mining outpost finally appeared through the storm 20 minutes later, half buried beneath layers of snow and ice. Rusted communication towers leaned against the wind while dim yellow lights glowed behind reinforced windows. Home. Or at least the closest thing left to one. Ethan slammed the crawler doors shut behind them and immediately felt warmth hit his face as the station's heaters struggled against the cold. Pipes hissed overhead. The entire place smelled faintly of machine oil, recycled air, and burnt coffee. You live here alone? The girl asked weakly as he carried her through the narrow corridor. Used to be 60 workers here, Ethan replied. Mining company pulled out 8 years ago after the ice quake started. And you remained. Rent is cheap. She studied him quietly as if trying to understand whether humans were naturally foolish or simply impossible to predict. Ethan laid her carefully onto the medical cot near the station heater and switched on the emergency scanner. Blue light swept slowly across her body, while warning symbols immediately flooded the screen in a language he could not read. Fantastic, he muttered. Even your biology hates me. The girl attempted to sit up. You should leave before the hunters arrive. You already said that. I meant it. Ethan pulled open a storage cabinet and grabbed sterilized tools, thermal patches, and medical foam. Good thing I am not a great listener. You risk execution by protecting me. Lady, I once got suspended for punching a supervisor who tried to cut oxygen supplies to injured workers. Apparently, I am not built for following smart decisions. Her glowing eyes remained fixed on him while he carefully cleaned the wound along her side. Up close, he could see faint geometric patterns moving beneath her skin like streams of living starlight. Alien. Beautiful in a way that did not seem entirely real. But beneath all of that, she still winced exactly like any human would when he applied disinfectant. This may sting, he warned. I survived atmospheric re-entry. That is not a yes. The second the foam touched the wound, she grabbed his wrist hard enough to make him inhale. Sharply. Despite her weakened condition, her strength was incredible. Ethan looked down at her hand, gripping his arm. Long silver-blue fingers, trembling slightly from pain. She realized what she was doing and immediately let go. Apologies, she whispered. Ethan only nodded and continued working. Outside, the storm battered the station walls while distant thunder rolled endlessly across the ice fields. Then suddenly every light inside the outpost flickered. Once. Twice. The old station computer crackled to life on its own. A holographic emergency broadcast appeared above the center console in cold blue light. Ethan slowly turned toward it. His blood ran cold instantly. A royal alien crest rotated above bold warning symbols. Then a face appeared beside it. The same silver hair. The same glowing violet eyes. The same woman sitting only a few feet away from him now. Galactic priority alert, the mechanical voice announced. Princess Lyra Vale, daughter of Queen Valoris, has been declared missing under Imperial emergency order. All citizens are required to report sightings immediately. Reward authorization exceeds planetary ownership rights. Ethan stared silently at the hologram, then slowly back at the girl on the cot. She lowered her eyes for the first time since arriving. I told you, she said softly. You should have left me in the snow. Ethan kept staring at the hologram long after the broadcast ended. The image of Queen Valoris lingered in the air above the console for several seconds before dissolving into static. Even then, the station suddenly felt different. Smaller somehow. Colder. The old heaters hummed softly through the walls while snow scraped across the windows outside. But now there was tension beneath every sound. Imperial emergency order. Planetary ownership rights. Ethan rubbed a tired hand across his face and let out a slow breath. You are telling me the entire galaxy is looking for you, he said quietly. Lyra sat against the medical cot in silence, silver strands of hair falling across her face as the heater light flickered over her blue skin. She no longer looked like a stranded traveler. She looked dangerous, important, untouchable. Not the entire galaxy, she replied softly. Only the parts that fear my mother. Ethan leaned against the nearby console and crossed his arms. And should I fear her too? Lyra met his eyes for a long moment before answering. Probably. Oddly enough, that almost made him laugh. Instead, he walked toward the small kitchen built into the station wall and grabbed the ancient metal coffee pot warming over the stove. You know, he muttered while pouring 2 cups. Most people introduce themselves before bringing an empire to somebody's front door. Most people do not drag strangers through plasma storms. Ethan handed her one of the steaming cups carefully. She looked down at it with confusion. What is this? Coffee. Is it medicine? Depends how tired you are. Lyra hesitated before accepting it with both hands. Her long fingers curled carefully around the warm metal mug as steam rose between them. Ethan noticed the way her shoulders relaxed slightly near the heat. Small things. Human things. For a while neither of them spoke. The station settled around them with metallic groans and distant pipe vibrations, while red lightning flashed faintly through the frosted windows. Ethan sat across from her at the old maintenance table and studied the alien princess in silence. Everything about her felt impossible. The glowing skin, the royal broadcast, the ships hunting her through the storm. And yet right now she simply looked exhausted. Why did your ship crash? He finally asked. Lyra lowered her eyes toward the steaming drink. Because someone wanted me dead. Ethan blinked once. That sounds like information you probably should have opened with. Would it have changed your decision? He thought about that honestly for a moment. Outside, wind screamed across the frozen station walls hard enough to shake the ceiling vents. No, he admitted. Humans, she whispered softly, almost to herself. You continue to confuse me. Ethan took a slow sip from his coffee. Yeah, we hear that a lot. Lyra carefully copied him, raising the cup toward her lips. The second she tasted it, her expression changed completely. Her glowing violet eyes widened in visible shock. Ethan nearly smiled for the first time all night. Bad. She looked down at the drink again as though trying to understand it scientifically. It tastes terrible. That means it is working. To his surprise, a faint laugh escaped her again. Softer this time. Real. The sound lingered warmly in the quiet station for a few seconds before fading beneath the storm outside. Then suddenly every light inside the outpost dimmed. Ethan's smile disappeared instantly. The motion scanner on the wall began pulsing red. Multiple incoming signatures. Fast. Lyra slowly set the cup down onto the table. They are here, she whispered. Ethan stood immediately and moved toward the frost-covered window near the airlock. At first he saw only darkness beyond the storm. Then blue lights appeared through the snow. One, then several more. Massive silhouettes drifted silently above the ice fields surrounding the station. Search craft. Hunting patterns. Ethan felt his heartbeat slow into something cold and focused. Behind him, Lyra rose unsteadily from the cot despite the pain still visible on her face. You should surrender me, she said quietly. They will reward you beyond imagination. Ethan kept staring at the ships outside while the red storm reflected across the glass. Funny thing about imagination, he said softly. Mine stopped caring about money a long time ago. Then somewhere above the station, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the storm. Outpost 7. Power down immediately. Surrender the princess. And for the first time in years, Ethan Walker realized the quiet little mining station at the edge of nowhere had just become the center of something much bigger than survival. The voice outside repeated itself through the storm, calm and mechanical. Outpost 7. You are harboring imperial property. Comply immediately. Ethan stood motionless near the frozen window while blue searchlights swept slowly across the ice fields surrounding the station. Every pass of light illuminated drifting snow and the outlines of black armored ships hovering silently above the ground. They looked less like rescue teams and more like predators circling wounded prey. Behind him, Lyra remained, perfectly still beside the table. The warmth from the coffee cup curled around her fingers while violet light flickered faintly beneath her skin. Imperial property, Ethan muttered quietly. That is a nice way to describe a person. Lyra lowered her eyes. In the Empire, duty matters more than individuality. Sounds exhausting. Outside, another pulse of light flashed across the station walls. The old metal structure groaned softly beneath the pressure waves from the hovering ships. Ethan moved toward the equipment locker beside the airlock and opened it carefully. Inside sat an old plasma cutter, emergency thermal packs, and several outdated mining tools that would not intimidate anyone except maybe poorly maintained machinery. He grabbed the scanner instead. Lyra watched him with confusion. You are preparing to fight? No, Ethan replied honestly. I am preparing to survive long enough to think of a better idea. She studied him silently for several seconds. Most beings would have surrendered me already. Ethan checked the scanner readings again. More signals were arriving overhead. Most beings do not know you. You do not know me either. That sentence lingered heavily in the station. Ethan slowly looked back toward her. She was right. For all he knew, she could be dangerous beyond imagination. A princess raised by the most feared ruler in known space. Someone powerful enough to trigger military searches across entire planets. And yet all he could picture was the moment he found her half frozen inside the wreckage, clutching that glowing sphere like a terrified child trying not to die alone. Maybe, he admitted quietly, but I know fear when I see it. Lyra's expression shifted almost imperceptibly at those words. Softer, more human. The station lights flickered again before stabilizing. Somewhere above the ceiling, the wind howled violently through rusted communication towers. Ethan walked toward the central console and began typing commands into the old station computer. What are you doing? Lyra asked, opening the geothermal vents under Ridge 12. Why? Ethan glanced sideways at her. Because this station was built by paranoid miners who expected pirate raids every other month. For the first time, genuine curiosity appeared in her glowing eyes. Ethan tapped several more commands, and old schematics filled the holographic display. Underground heat tunnels spread beneath the surrounding ice fields for nearly half a mile. Maintenance shafts, hidden supply routes, emergency exits. Lyra stepped closer slowly, her silver hair catching the dim light from the monitors. You intend to hide me underground. I intend to buy us time. Why? Ethan leaned back against the console with a tired sigh. You really like that question. Because your actions are irrational. Welcome to humanity. She stared at him quietly. Then, very softly, she asked, are humans always willing to risk themselves for strangers? Ethan thought about that for a moment while distant engines vibrated through the storm outside. No, he said honestly. But the good ones try. Something changed in Lyra's face then. Not dramatic. Just a tiny crack in the cold royal mask she had carried since the moment he found her. She looked down at the steaming coffee cup, still warming her hands. In the Empire, she whispered, we were taught humans were selfish creatures driven by greed and violence. Ethan gave a faint shrug. Sometimes we are. Then why save me? The question sounded smaller this time. Less like suspicion, more like confusion. Ethan looked toward the storm beyond the window where giant ships drifted through crimson snow like dark ghosts. Because leaving somebody to die in the cold felt worse. Silence settled between them after that. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with things neither of them fully understood yet. Then suddenly the station alarms blared loudly overhead. Motion detected. External breach attempt. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. The scanner showed several figures approaching the main airlock through the storm. Lyra looked toward him with visible tension returning to her eyes. They are coming inside, she whispered. Ethan reached slowly for the old mining torch hanging beside the console and exhaled once through his nose. Then I guess the quiet part of the night is officially over. The alarm echoed through the station in sharp metallic pulses while red warning lights swept slowly across the walls. Ethan moved toward the central console with the old mining torch in one hand and the scanner in the other. 3 figures outside. Heavy armor. Advancing through the storm toward the main airlock with steady precision. Not soldiers rushing into battle. Hunters confident the outcome was already decided. Can they track your life signs? Ethan asked without taking his eyes off the scanner. Lyra stood beside the table, pale from exhaustion but alert now. Normally, yes. But the storm interferes with long-range detection. Good. That means we still have a chance. A chance for what? Ethan looked toward the hidden geothermal tunnel schematic glowing above the console. For them to search the wrong part of the station first. Another impact rattled the outer door. Slow. Deliberate. Whoever stood outside knew exactly how much pressure the old airlock could withstand. Ethan crossed the room quickly and opened a maintenance hatch near the floor. Warm steam drifted upward from the darkness below. Underground access tunnel, he said, leads beneath the ridge. Lyra stepped closer carefully. You built this? No. Miners used it during whiteout storms when the surface froze over. He grabbed an old thermal lantern from the wall and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly as she accepted it. This time she did not pull away. The tunnel exits half a mile east, Ethan continued. There is an abandoned geothermal station there, shielded from scanners. Lyra stared at him quietly through the dim red emergency lights. You planned all this in less than 5 minutes. Ethan shrugged faintly. Panic keeps the brain creative. A loud metallic thud shook the station again. Dust drifted from the ceiling vents overhead. The hunters were forcing entry now. Lyra looked toward the airlock with visible tension. If they capture you, my mother will not forgive interference. Ethan gave a tired smile. Honestly, your mother sounds like somebody I would avoid at parties. To his surprise, Lyra smiled back. Small, quick, but real enough to soften something in her face that had seemed frozen since the moment they met. The alarm lights painted crimson reflections across her silver hair while snow battered the windows behind them. For one strange second, the station felt almost peaceful despite the danger surrounding it. Ethan climbed down into the tunnel first, boots hitting the metal ladder with hollow echoes. Warm geothermal air rose around them, carrying the smell of rust and wet stone. Lyra followed more slowly, still weakened from the crash. When she slipped slightly on the ladder rung, Ethan instinctively reached up to steady her. She froze the moment his hand touched hers. Not from fear this time. Something else. The glowing patterns beneath her skin flickered softly beneath the tunnel light. "Sorry," Ethan said quietly. "No," Lyra whispered. "You do not apologize for kindness." The sentence lingered between them as distant sounds echoed faintly through the station above. Heavy footsteps. Metal doors opening. The hunters had entered Outpost 7. Ethan led the way deeper through the narrow geothermal tunnel while steam curled around the ceiling pipes overhead. The deeper they walked, the warmer the air became. After hours inside the freezing storm, the heat almost felt unreal. Lyra slowed suddenly near a bend in the tunnel. Ethan stopped immediately. "What is wrong?" She was staring ahead silently. At first Ethan did not understand why. Then he saw it. Beyond the next tunnel chamber, faint green light glowed softly through the darkness. He frowned. That should not be active. They moved forward carefully together until the tunnel opened into a hidden underground room. Lyra stopped completely the moment she saw it. So did Ethan. In the center of the chamber, surrounded by old heating pipes and frost-covered metal walls, grew a small garden. Tiny green plants stretched beneath artificial lamps. Tomatoes, herbs, wildflowers in recycled containers. Fragile pieces of life hidden beneath a frozen world. Lyra stared at the plants with open disbelief, violet eyes reflecting the warm light. "You grew this?" she asked softly. Ethan suddenly looked embarrassed for the first time all night. "It is not much." Lyra stepped slowly toward a single white flower blooming beneath the lamps. Her fingers hovered near the petals without touching them. "Keeler, 9 is classified as biologically barren," she whispered. "Nothing should survive here." Ethan looked around the tiny underground garden quietly. "Yeah," he said. "That is what everybody kept telling me." For several long seconds, Lyra said nothing at all. Then Ethan noticed something shining in her eyes beneath the warm green light. Not fear, not suspicion, wonder. The underground garden remained completely silent except for the soft hum of heating lamps and the distant rumble of the storm far above them. Lyra moved slowly between the rows of plants as though afraid the fragile green life might disappear if she breathed too hard. Ethan watched her from near the tunnel entrance, arms crossed loosely against the cold metal wall. In the soft artificial light, she no longer looked like a hunted royal from another world. She looked young, tired, curious. "These flowers should not exist here," she whispered again, kneeling beside a small white bloom growing from a recycled mineral container. "Neither should half the things I have survived," Ethan replied quietly. Lyra looked back toward him. "Why continue growing them?" Ethan shrugged faintly. "Because somebody should." She studied him in silence for several seconds before lowering her gaze toward the flowers again. In the imperial worlds, gardens are reserved for the nobility. Entire ecosystems are controlled by royal decree. Ethan frowned slightly. "You need permission to grow food?" "To grow beauty," Lyra corrected softly. That answer lingered heavily in the warm underground chamber. Ethan looked around at the mismatched containers, rusted pipes, and handmade irrigation lines feeding tiny drops of water into the soil. Nothing about it was beautiful by royal standards. But somehow, seeing Lyra stare at the flowers with quiet wonder made the place feel important for the first time in years. Suddenly, the station intercom crackled faintly through hidden speakers somewhere above the tunnel. A distorted voice echoed downward through the pipes. "Thermal scans indicate underground activity." Ethan's expression hardened immediately. The hunters were getting closer. Lyra arose from beside the flowers, tension returning to her glowing eyes. "They will search the tunnels next." Ethan checked the old scanner clipped to his belt. Multiple signals moving through the upper station now. Organized patterns. Methodical. Then we move faster. But before he could turn away, Lyra spoke again. "Ethan." It was the first time she had used his name. He stopped instantly. Her gaze remained fixed on the garden lights reflecting softly across the flowers. "No one has ever shown me something like this before," she said quietly. Ethan blinked once. "A hydroponic garden?" "Hope." The words settled into the warm air between them. Ethan did not know how to answer that. Outside the hidden chamber, the tunnel lights flickered as distant vibrations rolled through the metal walls. Search teams entering deeper sections of the station. Time was running out. Yet for one strange moment, neither of them moved. Lyra stepped carefully toward one of the heating lamps suspended above the flowers. Soft gold light illuminated the silver strands of her hair, while tiny reflections shimmered in her violet eyes. "When I was young," she said softly, "my tutors taught me that humans destroy everything they touch." Ethan leaned quietly against the wall. "We do a pretty good job sometimes." And yet, she looked around the underground garden again. "You brought life to a frozen world simply because you could not bear the emptiness." Ethan let out a slow breath through his nose. "You make me sound more poetic than I actually am." A faint smile touched her lips again. Smaller this time. Sadder somehow. Then suddenly the tunnel alarms pulsed red. Proximity breach. Very close now. Ethan straightened instantly. "We have to move." Lyra nodded. But before turning away, she reached slowly toward the small white flower beside her. Ethan expected her to pick it. Instead, she gently adjusted one bent leaf back toward the warmth of the lamp. Such a tiny motion. Careful. Protective. Human. Ethan stared at her quietly as realization settled over him. Somewhere between the storm, the coffee, and the impossible garden beneath the ice, something inside the alien princess had begun to change. A loud metallic impact thundered through the tunnels above them. Dust drifted from the ceiling pipes. The hunters had reached the lower station levels. Ethan grabbed the thermal lantern and motioned toward the eastern maintenance corridor. "This way." Lyra followed beside him through the steam-filled passage while warning lights flashed dimly overhead. Their footsteps echoed softly through the tunnel darkness as the storm raged far above the frozen planet. Then, just before they disappeared deeper underground, Lyra glanced once more toward the hidden garden behind them. And for the first time since crashing onto Keeler 9, the daughter of the alien queen silently wished she could stay. The deeper tunnels beneath Keeler 9 felt older than the station above them. Steam drifted along the ceiling pipes in pale silver waves while ancient geothermal generators rumbled somewhere far below the ice. Ethan led the way through the narrow maintenance corridor with the thermal lantern casting long shadows across the metal walls. Behind them, distant footsteps echoed faintly through the tunnels. The hunters were searching methodically now, closer every minute. Lyra walked beside him in silence, one hand pressed lightly against the wall for balance. Her strength had not fully returned after the crash, but something in her posture had changed. The fear was still there. Ethan could see it in the tension around her glowing eyes whenever the alarms sounded overhead. But there was something else now too. Trust. They reached an old service junction where several tunnels split beneath the ridge. Rusted warning signs hung crookedly above sealed maintenance doors. Ethan crouched beside a control panel and wiped frost from the cracked screen. "The geothermal station should be another quarter-mile east," he whispered. "If the tunnels have not collapsed." Lyra studied him quietly beneath the warm lantern glow. "You speak as though surviving impossible situations is routine for humans." Ethan smirked faintly while forcing open the ancient map display. "It is either survive or fill out insurance paperwork. Survival usually feels faster." For a second, Lyra almost laughed again. Then the tunnel lights flickered violently overhead. A low mechanical hum rolled through the walls around them. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. "That is not good." "What is it?" Before he could answer, a cold blue light suddenly flooded the corridor behind them. Search drones. Small floating machines drifted silently into view through the steam, their scanning beams cutting slowly across the tunnel walls. Ethan immediately grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her behind one of the geothermal generators. The contact caught both of them off guard for a brief second. Her skin was warmer now, alive with faint, glowing energy beneath the surface. They crouched together in the narrow shadow beside the generator while blue scanner lights swept across the corridor only a few feet away. Ethan could hear the low mechanical clicks of the drones moving through the steam. Lyra remained perfectly still beside him, close enough that he could hear her breathing over the hum of the machinery. Then one of the drones paused. Its scanning light flickered directly toward their hiding place. Ethan's jaw tightened. Slowly, carefully, Lyra reached into the inner layer of her damaged suit and removed the glowing crystal sphere she had protected since the crash. Violet light pulsed softly through her fingers. "What are you doing?" Ethan whispered. Trust me. The words surprised him more than the crystal itself. Lyra closed her eyes briefly and pressed her hand against the sphere. Instantly, faint, glowing symbols spread across the nearby walls like reflections moving through water. The geothermal generator beside them vibrated once. Then the drones suddenly shifted direction. Their scanners flickered erratically before drifting down another tunnel entirely. Silence returned almost immediately. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You hacked them with a glowing rock. Lyra looked genuinely offended by the description. It is an imperial quantum core. Right? Very fancy glowing rock. To his surprise, she smiled openly this time. The expression transformed her face completely beneath the warm tunnel light. Less royal. Less untouchable. Just real. Ethan realized then that this was probably the first time she had smiled in a very long while. The thought hit him harder than expected. Somewhere far above them, the storm thundered across the frozen planet, while search ships carved blue fire through the crimson sky. But down here beneath miles of ice and metal, hidden beside ancient generators and flickering tunnel lights, something impossible had happened. An alien princess raised to fear humanity had started feeling safe beside one human man. Lyra looked down at the glowing sphere in her hands, her expression slowly becoming serious again. Ethan, she said quietly, there is something I have not told you. Ethan leaned against the warm generator pipes and folded his arms. That sentence is becoming a bad habit tonight. Her violet eyes met his. The Empire is not searching for me because I disappeared. The soft glow from the quantum core reflected across her face as distant alarms echoed faintly through the tunnels behind them. They are searching for me because I ran. The words lingered heavily in the geothermal tunnel long after Lyra spoke them. The Empire is searching for me because I ran. Ethan remained leaning against the warm generator pipes while steam curled slowly through the corridor around them. Somewhere in the distance, the hunters continued moving through the underground tunnels, their scanners humming faintly beneath the storm overhead. But for a moment, none of that mattered. Ethan looked at Lyra carefully. You ran from your own empire? She lowered her eyes toward the glowing quantum core in her hands. I ran from what I was expected to become. The violet light illuminated the sadness on her face in soft pulses. My mother rules through fear because fear keeps worlds obedient. Since childhood, I was taught compassion is weakness. Mercy is inefficiency. Emotion clouds judgment. Ethan frowned slightly. Sounds lonely. Lyra let out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. Loneliness is considered strength among imperial bloodlines. Silence settled between them again while the geothermal pipes vibrated softly through the walls. Ethan glanced toward the hidden garden tunnel. Behind them. Funny thing is, he said quietly, the strongest people I ever met were the ones who stayed kind anyway. Lyra looked at him then with an expression he had never seen from her before. Not curiosity, not fear, something deeper. The look of someone realizing the universe might not work the way they were taught. Suddenly, the tunnel speakers crackled violently overhead. Then a new voice echoed through the underground corridors. Calm, female, powerful enough to freeze the air itself. Princess Lyra Vale. Ethan felt Lyra stiffen beside him instantly. Return to imperial custody. This pursuit ends now. Ethan slowly exhaled. Please tell me that is not your mother. Lyra's silence answered for her. The tunnel lights dimmed as massive vibrations rolled through the underground structure. Something enormous had landed above the ridge. Ethan moved toward the nearest monitor panel and activated the external surface feed. The screen flickered once before stabilizing. His breath caught immediately. A colossal black command ship hovered above Outpost 7 like a moving eclipse, its engines burning blue against the crimson storm clouds. Smaller vessels circled around it in perfect formation while floodlights illuminated the frozen station below. Imperial insignias glowed across the hull in silver fire. Even through the old, grainy monitor, the ship radiated authority. Power. Finality. Lyra stepped beside him quietly. My mother came herself. Ethan stared at the screen. That feels less than encouraging. Then the monitor feed changed suddenly. A single figure appeared descending from the command ship onto the snow below. Tall, elegant, wrapped in dark silver robes that moved like liquid shadow through the storm. Queen Valoris. Even through static interference, her presence felt overwhelming. Ethan finally understood why entire systems feared her. Lyra lowered her gaze slightly. Not out of obedience. Out of pain. She will never forgive what I did, she whispered. Ethan looked toward her carefully. What exactly did you do? Lyra held the glowing quantum core tighter in both hands. I refuse to inherit an empire built without mercy. Those words hit Ethan, harder than expected, because suddenly everything made sense. The crash, the pursuit, the fear in her eyes when he first found her in the snow. She had not escaped enemies. She had escaped becoming one. Before Ethan could respond, the tunnel alarms suddenly blared at maximum volume. Search teams had reached their corridor. Footsteps echoed through the steam-filled passage nearby. Close now. Very close. Ethan immediately grabbed the lantern and motioned toward the final maintenance hatch leading upward. Move. Lyra followed him quickly through the narrow access shaft until they emerged onto the frozen surface east of the ridge. The storm had weakened slightly, but snow still swept violently across the ice fields beneath the dark silhouette of the Imperial fleet overhead. Ethan turned toward the distant mountains, preparing to keep running. Then Lyra touched his arm gently. Wait. He looked back at her. She stepped closer beneath the falling snow, violet eyes glowing softly against the frozen darkness. Then slowly, carefully, she placed the quantum core into his hands. The crystal pulsed warmly between them. What are you doing? Ethan asked quietly. Lyra's voice trembled for the first time since they met. In my world, this is only given to someone trusted beyond blood. Ethan stared down at the glowing sphere in stunned silence. Then distant floodlights suddenly swept across the ridge behind them. The Empire had found them. But Lyra never looked away from him as snow drifted between their footsteps beneath the endless crimson sky. You showed me something stronger than fear, she whispered softly. You showed me humanity.